Chapter 1. The devil rides out into the desert. He knows that the Eden's dry and so need not be burnt. His engines kick and rust, and they need oil, and he's had too much water. It flushes his blood and makes him chilled, breezy where the annihilation has gone thinnest, sharpest where the radioactivity is like noise and fuzz in the air. Spirit, too vigorous and plentiful, that has never let go of life to be given flesh.
There's nothing out here but the tracked trail and the sunlight sitting low, beaming. The skies are so blue that they are no longer drowning. Every sand crumbles down to black or white, if from fire or ice, space or eternity. And every lake, still in its ripples and hiding its depth, has been holding its breath, cracked into the crags and ridges of the earth for a lifetime or more if it held it in preparation. The dust lays a sheet over the sleek hub, the rubber handles of the throttle untwist, the brakes gone rigid and as relics, slow, creaking, blind, and obsolete, sticking out as bones poked through to horns, function to violence, purpose to persistence, and disregard. And on the steel of pistons, down to hydraulics, rolling gritted wheels across those vents and bared compartments, tanning the sleek fire of his bike into a padded surrounding that defies all entrance and treading of rot, white decay, or black depth and brooding either. Etchings are made as brands of all deviance and ownership, and opportunity and specific life and destruction, lines in snorting chrome. He rides until the chassis starts to shake, and the speed and hallucinations blend the numbers down on the glassy readers, ring like the pull of levers on slot machines, where every accelerating, rolling value, ticking, cycling, flashes a framed winner, gaping where all that becomes is the purity of the first and following intent, the balance and swing and flap and fly of the aim, leisure of focus where all that can be an obstacle, all that can be an impediment, help or hell, is spread wide and skewed to the most heaven-stricken slants and carves of eyes, danger to impedance and further, where the third dimension spun all the way around and reminded the creatures of time for endurance, rush for ransom, that every point had been a point of no return, and so was every direction, even back. He draws no loops or eights in the sand, and does not waver. He crashes. His bike breaks and busts right out from under him, and slides him down to his feet that buckle and roll away just the same. There is no rider except at the top, and he knows that. But none of his tumbling body does as he fumbles out onto the cracks and plaques of cakes of sand, settling into nothing but the lift and twiddle of the mirage. Surface makes scrapes and a filling hiss against his body as he comes to a stop, face down, to squinted shadow. The only shadow that there is over this ground, or has ever been in forever, even with so many that he was sure had passed through here before the end. He presses himself up and looks off. Somewhere on those horizons are mountains and ridges, and wires from telephone poles and roads, but not here. And out of sight was more than out of mind, if out of any reach was out of any chance of existence. Some senses were more dexterous, realer, more influential, but not the ones that sent you out this far, out to this place of no place, and the desire for it. He coughs and gasps and hunches, stretches the shock through and out of his spine. His sword still bounds and dangles on his back, buckled flat. It's always had its purpose. Why must we worship, he thinks? Up to the ceiling, through the roof to that light of life, of day and night passing in and under the seasons, the spaces and universes dwindling down, draddling faithful when there are now demons in the attics, in the black triangular shadow so like the point of the temple steeple, its hearth, its weighted, shadowy shelter, and it is more fearful that they may be alive, less than specters and coincidences, and more coal and grease, blackened bodies, dusted, grimed, crawling from the hunch, and making bolder and bolder thumps to the calls and cries and presences and failures of spirit of those a little fresher to new flesh, beneath in cherished, coveted rooms below, unaware, secrets that might have been kept, locked away, cousins, brothers, and sisters, echoes of demands and missions they follow to their own ends, without them and their own good selves, their own suffering, if that is all of sacrifice, to hide if the hiding would please the old gossip of elders and snarling blood enemies, opposed and long departed. Why, he thinks, must we pray straight through the demons, as if we pray to them, long prayed for them and their cricks and clatters, to roust the guilty to act, to blaspheme, curse the inside, the self, if there ever was a God, if there still was and never hadn't been, to see none of the emanating flow, whipping through eternity and twisting to slip off at no time to take what has then, by fact, if we take law in place of the Lord, justice in place of blessing, already been given. How can the burns on his skin be of bare grays to the edge of the sun, quick sweat gone seared, and tell him that it was here that the spirits are made of dust? Are they too beaten to crawl? Are all of our evils joints on the arms of rising towers, sniffing the atmosphere, arisen just as well as the light? He knows it is time. Slower, faster, endurant, engulfed, any and nothing more. A mission from a past life to the next. To try again, to disbelieve this Creator in favor of the surviving. The memory of it and those that come cleanest would be the quickest to find the filth. A dry imprint of body on the soul that he's carried none of his possessions and possessors to this original waste. Thus has nothing to protect him, but nothing to suffocate him on the way to bitter, fiery, burning infinity. The roof is open. The scalp is flat to the orb, the reflection, the mirror of blue sky, to glass ancestors and futures in turn, the war prepared, jittering, a gasp, and the lift can carry him by the shoulders to a burial of a spine, roots of mind and all, cultivated, yanked. But there is none that is not ephemeral, soothing, washing in lines along the latticework that you do not ask the Lord to strike, you come to seek his powers, that you ask him to pick you up and see. See if he would lay you any closer than everywhere, as he can feel you, as close as you brought yourself from forever. And already the devil pants because the first hit of the idle glare tells him that he just asked for hell to overwhelm, replace the spaces and environment of this singular earth. Shall receive, begged for it, shall receive, and the presence looks all across the starshine to see if there is a better, interesting, unbalanced location to which to remove him, to show the devil purpose, but would come back when he was nothing left but bones and seed. The waters are frozen and exiled all throughout the universe. He came here to heaven, as dosed and roaring and rumbling, as hot as hell, skipping the always sent to goad and to break, to lead the souls between the darknesses fluid, and abandons them that come to lie and say, you need not be alone to face God, death. Life that tricked vestigial wings when the weight was to fly, and told you that your answer is still your own, your valiances less defeated, the glory still to the above as opposed to the also circular below, and he leaves them to their voids and the vortex, its draperies and shams and animalistic endowments, to see God at the beckoning, to sleep outside the gates, since the most unworthy has never been, never is, never can be, and with this kneeling, if the waves and mirages and the boiling, bubbling of the fever with this remembrance deepens, before all else, again, forever, the devil asks, bent, busted, bruised, so that he cannot start to be now, with full belief and full desire. May I take the throne? Alleviate the immensity, heal the rigidness of the great. He would storm into the castle, fed on snow, a taste of blood washed in ice, thin blue as air wavers from wash and water to the mirage and the way forward, to the white and the sand ripple. And he would take it all apart, if he is not born there and learned of its benefits. The ice stone in the walls cracks. The devil looks up, notes the distance and the tan hue of his failure. Further always means the opposite of more. The sun falls so deep it brings up the moon, full like it itself brings the day or shows through it. Horns are just waves grown old from faraway oceans, hung from bone, burrowing, collecting. A scorpion crawls to him, as if from nowhere, or the cracks or any innumerable distance, with silence in the taps of feet and endurance, where time is the sole focus and measure, where distance is always too heavy, too unimaginable, too infinite in tricks and sways and destinations. There is no shelter and home and mercy for any, no proximity, no chance, no gamble, and gills are vents for the salt of deserts, swallowed deepest of waters most recent departed, most once plentiful, hoarded and choked fastest, drained in and out and up and down. And the scorpion, with its shell, its pincers, and its stinger, stares at the devil where he is knelt, finds that there is no question to ask, seems to cock its head in the glimmer of the baking sands, or resists not the waves now that they are of air and heat, and clouds lost, wandering the barrens, wondering why they'd come here, why they'd been sent out here with nothing to shade, rested so high to gloom, and there is no need to fear evil without conviction, if that is the one missing intent to make evil itself, and all-powerful as such. The scorpion is not afraid of the devil, the leather-bound one, sweating grease, panting oil, never asked that it should be, a creature shocked and crumbled and bent over the rumble of the malleable bones. The devil imagines the poison in its tail's tip and fears it as such, minds the torture of ending in a deep, empty hallucination with no reference points, no real to be unrealized, and no returns. He is worried of its crawling all over him, its search of his ridges and happenings and keeps, as rags to the carryings, but he does not move. He is tired. He is as beaten as the beaten track, the stamps and stampedes that roll like wheels. As though the poison is already filling him, as the soul stares that has found clean water in no heaven but the darkness and yet remains, he remembers the eyes of the mystic at a last half-empty road-stop bar before his final travel, where he was getting drunk in the musty tavern, ready to ride again on ethanol like rocket fuel for the blood cells, staring away and down at the devil's cards on the table, the whites of the eyes bulging, the veins rippling and collapsing, yellowed, away, away, away. Spread clear and focused in a feverish, sweating alcoholic bead and point, peering at the edges of sight pushed to the limits, quivering, shaking, and forced and told to watch as the all-ignoring babbles the future at the new false prophecy of another apocalypse. The scorpion climbs not on him either. It looks longer with its black eyes, always open, if asleep beneath the consciousness enfolds, curious, ensured, answered, and forgiven in disinterest, falling away from all that is life, and turns away instead, turns the black eyes, forgotten, shifts a corner, because it remembers the square, clicks and clatters off past and behind the devil's back, clambers into the mirage of foggy dust, stirred, and the devil hears the stab and crunch of its pincer, poised over the scorpion's own neck, as it strikes, stings its own brain, the needle through the scalp and skull, a crack, and dies in an instant. He does not look back to know it is suicide. Silent. There is no oasis here, only a further, another, a brighter, and yet more beautiful mirage. The blood that he spills and rots raises no garden, no wondrous forest, no cradle and comfort in civilization, no grasses of cultivation tucked in these rides, settled endless, and no groove sunken, no high-rise worshipped, symbolized, anchored, just swept up and away from the earth, from the span, from those that may have chanced upon its fruits, forlorn, feral, forsaken. There is no life after death, and never is. The angels in the temple, atop the leaf, they tell of it. There are some, somewhere, from any of the so many viewpoints, that can see, have seen, and can attest to these facts, these witnessings. There are some that can see very far and very far down. In the court with its pillars carrying no roof, a phantom coliseum or great hall with its overladen vines, the berries that dangle and feed them, and yet make their stomachs sick and sour, their minds hot and feverish and dripping with sugar and the fullness of fasting, the cleanliness of starvation, the shivers, the shakes, the anticipations. They hear word from every post, from every living window, from every scent and sense of every slave in the toiling belly, and it shows a shade of the end of day, reminding them that every wall of the castle turns away at some point, at some time, away from the light. The priest with the green eyes is telling the progression now, the journey of the constant Antichrist, knelt and huddled to his knees at the cracks and tears of the stone court to speak it, and scratches the boldness of its tone. We have to make and keep heaven flat across our many influences, our indicators, our connections in very kinds where they are best fit and stationed, because it always breaks out and down into the many circles, the many horizons, and splinters our views to each other, our acknowledgments, or our fated warnings. The open fields where the enemy and the friend alike are seen far and unfurled upon their approach, before their manifested arrival, never remain that way. The blood and the body pit for long and soon gash and attenuate, to leave kings and queens beset on all heights of evil, chosen if the inescapable destiny is divine. Back to back, side to side, face to face either, blind and brave to the separations of the plains of their people in the end, the loss of their kingdom where it was the first victory won, as nature's like child, the first allies at arms, entrusted, bewitched, and betrayed, bedeviled and instinctual in the youthful chaos, in the uprise, in the clearest sight, if lowest, newest from opposing purposes of the Creator, not the last, not the truest, and not the final. The priest, the spirit with the blue irises, he turns his eyes down and does not want to listen to the gossip any more, or to the meanderings in the depths of dark, airless, breathless serenity. He knows what he has done to avert that crisis of soul, but still he sits, leans against the pillar, half standing back in the full shadow, watching over the man with the green spirit, ovular, reflected out, mimicked in shield for wars that were not of body, but of wind, of dust, of dreams in the sleeping quiet, babbling in grumbles, curled up in thirst and seeking water, immovable where he knows both light and dark are needed for growth and rebirth. The blue priest never can accept his death at the basin of the ocean to be reborn, incarnate, washed through the upstreams of bubbles to inhale air again, and still he has never passed or lifted once his chest in a gasp of gills, sensitive, adapted, and adept, still breathing the last of the first breath out to get to the bottom and wait for eternity to expand them out toward the surface and catch the freshness, so like quick smoke to spacious fire, engulfing, consuming, releasing to the roulette the spirit to the flesh, the empty, steaming, cool, wicked sky. He does not breathe, but the green priest does not drink or hunger. 3 have gathered over by the edge, the patio and bow of the face of the castle that stretches out and over the view of the red, dusty, jagged desert landscape beneath, to sit and feel the sun set. There's a bench of stone carved to be wrought, a flash off the pan of the last light, on legs crooked, permanent, and the goddess of the purple spirit, the fanning purple irises, sits in the middle, allows the girl of the pink eyes to curl in against the foot as she wants, as the goddess of purple knows no one else wants to sit that bold and arrogant to the even flush of the light and look down over shadow. Little lovely lady of hawk's wings, angel of smooth death. The spirit with the pink eyes, her spine is hardened. She likes the contours of the false claws of the bench's legs, knuckled and dug into the muscles of her back, rippling, stabbing, suspending her there, looking off down the span of the deck, the stone galley, the blocked and brandished railing, curved and swooped off to a point and port called noon. There are no others wandering now, out, going anywhere, but they are there, as they're still, and many of them. If they were moving and turning, and the whole world was lifting out from under them in all directions, lifting out under the planets, and fires, and lights, and stars, all shameless and beaming down torrents of thoughtless soul to sprout or sear or return, then they are sailing, and they were being carried by these winds, if slower, if vesseled on ships in harbors of rock, if coasting between the lift and tossed of some great underswell of the ebbing hurricane, off the crisp, foaming overtide of its whip, cast and leap, waiting to wash along new broken waters, sprung, flooding, the sinking continent, and there are many generations in between, promises of old roadways, promises of gentle dealings for those that dove down to the deepest and steepest of the storm or thinner skyrise either, whichever plains we must rise over so that we may not land splattered against the heartless peak. The crumble between the oasis, the civilization, the valley and the shore of ever after, the dam that keeps the molten lava from running alike, the cliff that releases too the cradled swamps from its belly, its belch, its acid like sickened oceans vomiting the glowing knot, spinning forever, churning with no conquerors, just remnants, just lusheries among the glinted preserve, and the hordes of chaos riders that crawl up beneath their hands, past their consciousness in time, as any temple or home finds when its graces are granted, when its flights are solidified. The Lord with the orange eyes, the fringes of fiery yellow, he crosses his legs and sits at the toes of the two, in the middle, in the open under the foot of the archway, to the court, expelling and crossed by the long balcony, aft and bow, at the edge. They rest in their hallways. He's the one of them who sits facing the light direct, the one to see it fall over that basin. Nothing escapes his watch because he has set himself to peer over the oncoming, the flows of the light into blackness, all that is necessary of the guard. There is too much heat over that apocalypse for there to be any more wars. When would they let time off the chains and his leash, so that he may run in any other way than forward or back? They can hear the green-eyed lords talking, telling them what he knows of the happening there. At the end, at the finest, driest grain of slipped sand, at the emptiest central destination of the desert, purple rock wavering under a river of wind, the distance only measured by no return, and its furthers, the blasphemy that arises at the reality of the melting mirage, and they are not listening. But there is nothing else to hear. There is nowhere else to go, and no way, like the glimmers in the musics of the forest, to hide from the magic sound, permeable, attuned, or to stop it from sinking into the pores, and the rattle of their thoughts, to escape like sight or taste or touch, or how close. A bird chirps atop the locked steeple, and an entire hell and wasteland shifts, moves, rends, slices in split pierce, and echoes back against him from beneath. It shows the burst and stolid listener all the flight patterns and lifts of care, the currents and the pitfalls from the relative self. They play a game in front of each other, but they are too tired and too interested and too shy in their view of what keeps them alight, as the skew of existence falls off itself, redelivered. The Lord with the red eyes, the red hazel glare, he takes his place behind all of them, away from the castle overlooks, and away past the court where he has wandered enough to know all wanderings lead to the garden, fruited or thorned, or wrapped or ornamental. He walks through the muddy trails in the false darkness, the twisted hollows like roots and bark, a place that none has owned but the nurturing. And he finds a bench in public by the grasses, a place owned by more than anyone or no one, but by everyone. And he finds that he is alone among the high priests and lords and spirits for that reason. He finds a place around the back of the temple that shades so deep, and morning seems to start before the night has passed, or become even prevalent, aware, pronounced, where only the span of the lowest light passes him. But it is better to be passed than none at all, and for that he sees the first uprise of morning, like it is no more, and no more exciting, no more foretold than the pit of day, both those lights held in the hands of one God, and the rest is up to him to be drawn out and around their full sway from the cool of waking to arise, finding the light failing and then struggling in stance until passing to sleep, exhausted, to feel as the night comes up once again. He sought the shelter of God's branches, found also the leaves and the stings that slip between all of them, as he knows he follows many a first light's arch to the very end, and rests without change for sleep, dreams without air. But he also misses many prophecies of always remaining, lift as clockwork so long before they've begun that they are as bitter death, life after life of black-souled youth that has been kept unaware of the passage of the consuming season following and the angle of treasured orbit. The galaxy is a diamond for the creator, but is taken by the finder, the hunter, or the digging rat. It is cherished as such, for as soon as it is plucked from the path of eternity, and ever a new beginning, ever a nature unjust for our pleasures, for our gains, for our benefits of providence, it separates, completes the illusion of loss and continued existence. No pure light means any light when you have escaped, if you have. He can hear them around the corner, and he has told his part already. The devil awakes from a pang of a stroke, still kneeling in the light, his mind blurring and bending out of shape over all the perceptions and sights at his sides. From a crack in the earth, a child crawls out, a naked baby, curious and aimless. It knows not how it is, or how it came to be here, or how its seed has sprung, or, if ever, this first granted flesh needs to be renourished, or if it needs nothing but to crawl into the sun, the sand of the beach for those who are not, and cannot be sighted enough to be swallowed by the ocean. The adventure descended, and its paws like that, head too thick and big and veiny for its body, bulbous and prolonged or knotted in its lobes, like it was trying to hold all the stretches and outbursts of the rippling, uneven, expanding universe, all in its own mind, eyes as black and dilated, empty as soul from full space, seeing light for the first time through any medium. It's a beast, and a demon if there was any. It would stare, blank, at any object or body it desired, and take what it wished if it could. No morality or sense as no consciousness, But all there is for creatures of the darkness to desire is curves and motions out of the colorful light, the stigmatic symbols, barriers, the surviving glyphs. They peer, unassuming, translating, projecting over the incoming life, still wrought and gripped through the dreams of the underland and the time after the bitter death. It peers long past its hands and doesn't have the spine to know yet that it is upright, that it is not an animal in the house of the Lord any more. It does not pay attention to the devil because the devil is dead. Terrain in the overworld, mass stabbed up and ridged out in bones or mountains from the flattest desert of God's approach, his field, his overlook, and yard landing in his temple, where the sand does not rest but to shift, and to let none in if they were ever to find salvation. It would be the meandering of an unknown child that would find it, like this one, and a child like this to let it slip away without carrying the memory in etchings to the deep, alive forever on accident, eternal, blessed, and protected as favored angels, saints, silent, penitent sufferers at any of the many hands of creation at the one grip, together. He looks up, the devil, with no evil in him, beside him, hiding in any crack of his spirit or body, as ever, as always, as each time he comes sinless, truthful, if murderous to the end, if capable. He looks on again, and it still forces him to look up. The sun has fallen so deep that it has dropped off the edge of the earth. It drags the moon out, straight above, or, like the moon, follows the sun, cautious, bathing, but only reflecting, tentative, towing, touching, metered. That is our past, the moon where the sun is our future, where what has already come over as night or life can show us a place where even the icy snow can turn to white dust, ruffled, craterous, orbital, can burn skin and shine mirror and soul light from every fiber of its surface, dimensional, real, to show no beneath, the destiny, the giving, the dry layers, and then a place where the fire is so hot, the eminence is so bright that its core, upon vision, brave to its blinding, can become as black and molten as the great void. Ultraviolet, shallow, a circle flat, engulfing, shrinking as a coin, as a place where no route can be made, no turn to sneak you around the sun without full facing its one surface and edge. Its open cone, limiting, if defiant of logic, intelligence, and beyond gravity, the third dimension itself and height and the surroundings of new tries, that it shows us that the bang keeps banging and forces us straight out, spins us so tight we think we ever control or escape its view, cycle or avoid around its presence, a place in the time to come where even the heat of the light can turn itself to a plane of depthless dark, the corners of an all-knowing, all-being, all-present sphere, bending the alive to render their constant status unreal, blind to the still, unhidden truth, a representation of a straighter, edgeless power, an arrogance over control or shape, beaten, made to kneel and grovel in all possibilities, a suffering without purpose, without recompense or smoke of gasping steam, without absolution or mercy from those that wait for the reward, and the devil can see the earth riding up between them, banding out, firing from the string drawn tight, the cord strapped ephemeral, rattled in any compilation, wired and pathwayed over any structure to shoot the gap between them, hold their kinds tight. Listen for the infinite whispers of treason between them, day and destroyed, night and aligned, the unspoken agreements of the bend, the lost fortunes of wars, the stolen failures and victors, and he can see at this rising corner and warp that we made time by standing between the light and the others that have tried to stand there. A sun turned out of sight, and a moon still catching its wriggling, permeating, unlimited rays across the edges, and through the very rocks, plateaus, lands and homes, cores and bodies that would block it, into never light, had it not already captured the glow, and released it on choicer domain. Slower, like a feeding, like a drink from the silver stream, milk, sheen, and nectar of the flowing mother. The one and single reason we have time, the devil sees, is that we separated ourselves over all that is life, and were frayed out like pumice and impermanence into color, into a skew of what was, sensing what it might be and what is to be, remembering what it has been. We make time by standing in the sun. We receive it when we awake to the moon. There are many that have seen the future long before us, but they are also those who are burning so hot they may not have the eternity to speak it. Not before those that remember have dreamed around the passage, traversed, impeded as impediments are to themselves and their others, and imagine, with no proof, but no fear, no doubt, that there is already another day on the other side of this one. Full eclipse, full red sunset. The light passed through here, through us, before we passed through it. The devil stands up. The day is so heavy that it's dark. The sun might lift right up from there and come up for a second day, and then rebound back over from the deep blue for a third and returned for a fourth. And then on and on, if they could count them now. A pendulum and line of devastation if they were risen in history, or it might twist in full circle, tickling that ridge, spinning them for the horizon, never gray, never gray, never gray. Never descended, never fallen where their planet would ring and settle like a coin on the tables of deities, one side to be crushed in darkness, one to glare and fry in reflection, to pick and escape one energy to find another, wobbling down from where it was cast until picked and lifted and flicked again across constructed universes. But the baby's choice, and his choice, is to remain. He turns, sees the baby, the child crawling at his feet in its own way, over the same spaces again, gone nowhere far, no question, no loss of curiosity for the dark, cracks of crooked, branched path. The scorpion off to the right, its stinger stuck in its own brain at the back of the devil's ear, tiny and skeletous and black. And he's so sharp, so thick-headed, so laden with the meaty ash that puffs through his blood, buried, rotted, so vicious at the dark pier, the last yellow cowardice of the sun and God is set and left long ago, a pale green sickness before it at the very edge, burning so forsaken, healing a sky to feel the crucifix of the ocean, to pray for any tornado, any boiling hurricane. He takes a huff, smells the black night, a time that has already passed in all its manavers, yanks and pulls his sword from his back. A mask like tempered steel and shining scars over his face, horns for eye holes, steam for skin sears, the melted face of the afterlife for glue into armor, cephalized, walks to the child, on the ground, the floor of the earth, the deliverance left in the dust as it is, has been and should be, lifts the sword's weight, its heaviness, swings down solid and true at the neck with the mind, the brain at the body, and lops off the head of the baby.